morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Big Decisions for Anfield Index. It's been a long time since we did one of these, but, well, with an end to the window like that, with certain things to consider, there is plenty to discuss. And I'm delighted to say, joining me on the chopping block today is the renowned and the respected David Lynch. David, are we ready for what's about to follow?
Why am I about to be absolutely grilled? Maybe not. But there's a lot to get into from this window. It's a really exciting one. So, yeah, looking forward to discussing it all and breaking it down.
Good stuff. And for those of us that are new to the Big Decisions format, there's three big questions that we will be posing to David, and we need definitive answers. We will be grilling him. We will be looking for gaps in his testimony and making a decision and rolling on what will follow. And funnily enough, as the comments start coming about Mo Salah cooking today, that might just be getting a mention at the same time as well. But the first topic we're putting to you, David Lynch, is this transfer window, which, I don't know, just before we get into the formalities of this question, is it just me or has this window seemed to have gone on longer than any other Liverpool window before?
Yeah, I think that's fair, just because you usually have kind of like weeks of just real quietness and nothing going on and kind of, whereas this, it's just been a new story every day and something else to discuss. And so it's just kind of, there's been twists and turns constantly as well in certain signings and attempts to make signings. So yeah, it's just felt like there's something fresh all the time, which I suppose it can either make it go quickly in terms of, because it is interesting, but also, yeah, it feel like we've packed an awful lot into that period of time, whereas complete contrast to the summer before, which was, of course, very, very quiet.
Yeah, it just feels so different. And that is the first big decision. Is this the window of all windows, the window for the ages for us fans? And I'm going to rewind you all the way back to when we first, I'd say, really started talking about this. Maybe April, May time, it's fair to say. It is fair to say, though, isn't it, that yourself, other journalists, not people, quote unquote, picked a big summer, but no one saw it to this extent, did they?
Yeah, definitely not. I think we'll kind of probably wrote around the line of it's going to be a big summer for Liverpool, and obviously, but I always thought it was going to be a big summer to some extent. There was potential for some churn in the squad because, Darwin Núñez, for example, you expected him to go. There was potential for some others, Harvey Elliott, who hadn't had minutes, potential for those to go. And then you knew Liverpool would want to do a couple of bits anyway to enhance the squad. So left back was always kind of nailed on. The fact that they were probably going to sign a forward of some variety to replace Núñez as a starting point. But I never expected anything like this. I mean, it's unprecedented, not just because of the amount of spending for Liverpool, but there were certain things that you got used to under this ownership where they generally like to reduce turnover. You wouldn't see huge changes in a single summer. So you felt like those were kind of things that you'd learnt about this ownership, and that, Michael Edwards back in place. So it's probably going to be run in a very similar way to before. But obviously, it's just been like nothing we've ever seen, really. I mean, so many sales that you kind of didn't expect. I mean, Jarell Quansah, for example, is a good example in that, you could have made the case quite easily for him being sold in terms of, and I know the ambition on his side was to go out and play, but it was just the fact that kind of you were gonna lose Trent, you were gonna lose Jarell Quansah from the same defence in one window. Harvey Elliott had similar concerns about playing time, and he also went. I just think it's just this sheer extent of it all, really, is that I just did not think that they would kind of address all those issues in one go, that they would let Jarell Quansah go, that they would let Harvey Elliott go in the same window. It's just very, very unlike what we've seen before. I think if Jurgen Klopp was in place, we wouldn't have seen as much. I think he would have convinced at least one of those two players to stay and given promises about minutes or whatever. That has just not been the case. And so, when you start to kind of add up those departures, those players need replacing largely. And so, what was already going to be, you've got a couple of signings you want to make at the very start of the window. It starts to add up to 3, 4, 5. And then just because of the extent of the outgoings, it started becoming 6, 7, 8. So absolutely crazy, really. And yeah, just so much bigger than the big summer we predicted, really. So yeah, pretty remarkable.
And it is important to bring this into the mix because you did say, and it's right to as well. And Paul Joyce tweeted this a couple of days ago to say, and obviously when mentioning Harvey's sale, just those figures that they've sold this summer, 236 million guaranteed, and it could go up to 262 with add-ons. And adding in last summer, if you put on add-ons, 324.5 million. Liverpool have bought well, but they've sold brilliantly, haven't they?
Absolutely, and you can say, you know, when anyone kind of questions how are Liverpool doing this, well, it's kind of just written down right in front of you there. You know, we can talk about the fact that the club's been turned around commercially. We can talk about the fact that there's no drag from infrastructure projects, and in the case of the two new stands, those infrastructure projects are actually delivering money now. That's for part of the picture, but the biggest part in terms of the size of the outlay is just written in black and white there. It's that Liverpool have sold incredibly well, and they're not doing a Chelsea either, where it's kind of, you know, swapping one player of a certain quality for a player of a similar quality. They've sold key players, but they've replaced them and improved the quality. So it's just been just an unbelievable window for Liverpool, and just the culmination of kind of 15 years of hard work in terms of getting the squad into this position, getting the smart decision makers in place. As I say, all the kind of off-field stuff coming together, and then kind of years of being a side that consistently challenges for trophies. That allows you then to challenge for the top players and try and sign them. So like I say, I just feel like it's been this window has been kind of 15 years in the making, really. And you know, every good decision that FSG have made, and there have been a lot of them, and a couple of bad decisions as well, but a lot more good decisions. They've all kind of paid off at once now, and Liverpool just look like they are in a position to, you know, consistently be this sort of club that can spend at this level, that can, that is a juggernaut again, really.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely looks that way. And you take a glance over this squad. I mean, there's been reinforcements as the Premier League list in all areas. And we know the names like Wirtz, Isak, Kerkez, Frimpong, and many others, Ekatike there, as we mentioned as well. I suppose when you take a glance over that, there has been a lot of recruitment, not always as much as everyone would like, but we're never going to please everyone. That's the nature. Which area of the team do you look at and think was strongest there? And is there any area you think we could have done a bit more there at all?
I struggle to see where there are weaknesses in this squad. I mean, you're wary of kind of saying that sometimes, because obviously the game is played on grass, and it's, you know, we'll see over a long season where the weaknesses are. You'll tend to discover them, but I mean, it looks pretty good to me all over the place. I mean, you know, you've added Wirtz to midfield, and your only kind of significant loss there is Harvey Elliott, who made his first Premier League start after the title was won last season. You know, you can also include Wirtz almost as a forward, and what he brings creatively, and goals and assists that he will bring as well. And then the fact that you've thrown in Ekatike and Isak into that, just, you know, the level of quality is really, really going up. And then, you know, in defence, immediately we're seeing that left back is stronger than it was last season. You know, not doing down Andy Robertson at all, but he's not quite as good as he used to be, which I think that's fair to say. And so to add someone of Kerkez's quality, who is going to get even better, is still only very young as well. You know, you've added Frimpong at right back is a smart signing, and he's very different to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but looks like he's going to bring an awful lot. So it just looks like a very good squad. I think your small question marks are, it would have been nice to upgrade Joe Gomez on the final day, wouldn't it? Not to upgrade Joe Gomez, the player, but I mean, upgrade the fact that he does pick up injuries, and that's a little bit of a worry that you have. You know, that would have been nice to maybe swap him for Marc Guehi, although, you know, Joe Gomez would be missed because what a loved player he is and a great lad. You know, that might have been decent. And we will find out, won't we, a kind of what happens on that left-hand side and how that whole thing shakes out, and whether Liverpool do miss having that Diaz-Gakpo thing. But, you know, you're picking holes at the moment that maybe aren't there. So we will see. The proof will be in the pudding. But I think on paper that is, and a stress on paper, that is surely the best squad in the Premier League, surely.
Yeah, it does look that way. And this is a proper first world problems, because it's being greedy, but we all wanted this. naturally, we had the Marc Guehi situation. It looks like Palace pulled the plug. The player was there in the Liverpool offices, all waiting to do everything and complete that. How much do you think this will buy in terms of, and we're saying maybe the first 6 months of the season, because we don't know if they revisit it in January as well?
Yeah, possibly not at all, to be honest, because I just think I don't know what this kind of obsession is with saying Konate is now completely useless, having been part of the best defense in the country last season, and a side that for me would have won the Champions League if not for coming up against PSG when he did. I just think the first team and that defensive option there is absolutely fine. And if Joe Gomez can stay fit, and that's the big question mark. Yeah. Can Joe Gomez stay fit to give you an option there? He's a really, really good defensive option. We don't know about Leone. He's a really unknown quantity, isn't he? But it's all this talk about like Guehi was going to come in and absolutely be a nailed on starter. I'm not entirely convinced that that's the case, to be honest. So, and if he is eventually, and he's going to come in and boost the squad in January, then I don't have any concerns whatsoever that Liverpool can get by till then. The one thing I would say on Guehi is you can't guarantee that Liverpool will go for him in January because it seems like why would 3 months pass and they don't want him anymore? But football's a bit like that, really. Like sometimes things change all the time. Leone might be further along than they maybe realised when they bring him in. Liverpool wanted Zubamendi, and then they don't sign him, and then Gravenberch becomes what he becomes, and then all of a sudden Zubamendi comes to the Premier League, and it's not with Liverpool. So things can shift, and he can shift really quickly. So I wouldn't really make any guarantees that he comes in January. But if that is a goer, and he does, then no doubt be a boost to Liverpool's defensive options. But the idea, and I saw it was Jeff Stelling was discussing it on TalkSport, the idea that they're completely useless at the back without signing Marc Guehi. Did anybody watch Liverpool last season at all? They were pretty good defensively, you know what I mean? Like underlying numbers, actual numbers. They would have had the best defensive record in the league if they hadn't kind of clocked off 4 games early. So I don't know where this myth has come from that they're absolutely useless at centre half. And by the way, Van Dijk to me doesn't look like he's declining either. I thought he was pretty good at the start of this season. So it'd be nice to get him, and if you can get him in January, fantastic, but not a disaster either.
Yeah, I didn't really get that Jeff Stelling bit because he was doing it and saying how bad Liverpool were after they just kept a clean sheet against Arsenal at home at the same time as well. But hey, different people, different opinions. And yeah, I think you're right. Ultimately, it will come down to what happens to Joe Gomez. And it's important because a few people had asked around this. Konate, because we talked about this on the last Media Matters, seems all good, doesn't it? It was just cramped by all accounts and that he's back to normal, if I'm right.
Yeah, that's a boost because I thought he was right back to his best against Arsenal again. Just like criticism way over the top as usual about everything really in football is that, he had a dodgy first 2 or 3 games in the end of the season, and he's completely written off as an absolute liability. But I thought against Arsenal he was really, really good, and thankfully just cramped because he was putting a lot of work in and played really well. And yeah, good to see it's nothing serious, and that he'll be back to hopefully just continue starting games for Liverpool at the other side of the international break.
Yeah, touch wood on that. And I suppose to finish it off, this is probably the easiest of the 3 questions I was going to ask you. This is a Liverpool window for the ages, isn't it? It is the best one we can really remember in recent times.
It's the most exciting one, I think, in terms of the names. And if anyone had said to you at the end of last season, Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak, I mean, scrap all the rest, but just those 2 in particular are going to be added to this team and going into a side that's defending champions, is just blown your mind, wouldn't it? So, plus everything else they've done on top, which is, everybody else they've signed also looks like a really clever signing. It's very, very exciting. I'm always just wary of kind of giving anyone a clip and saying it's been a fantastic window before the football starts, and maybe it's disastrous, and we'll see. But because I think I can't remember who I saw make this point on social media the other day. It might have been Ian Doyle actually, and he said about the idea that nobody kind of knew that the summer with the midfield signings was one of the great windows, but it really was. Szoboszlai, Endo, McAllister, Gravenberch. What an unbelievable window that was. Every single one of those a hit. I know Endo doesn't play all the time, but he's been a really good servant so far. So yeah, we kind of have to wait to judge the window, but certainly on paper, wow, blown my mind and been much bigger and more impressive than I ever imagined.
Yeah, it is unprecedented. But as you said, what does it translate to on the pitch? We'll have to see on that one. And the second question is kind of sticking with a transfer theme now. And this has been talked about a lot by a lot of people and saying, I don't like where the game is going. And you'll know all the rhetoric around this. And probably it focuses around, Alexander Isak and making his move. And there's an article in The Athletic, and I know you did it on a YouTube, talked about how we've got to this point all the way through. The thing I want to sort of start with this now about, do players have to force it? You think of Alexander Isak saying, well, I had an agreement with there. You think of Harry Kane. Do you remember we did that little playing golf with Gary Neville and said Daniel Levy and me had a gentleman's agreement? I mean, it's clauses now. Gentleman's agreements, quote unquote, are worthless when it comes to transfers, aren't they?
Yeah, I think players and agents have got to get wise to that now, because clubs will not stick to those. If it's not written down and signed, then you will, it is ultimately worthless, because clubs will pull every excuse they can out the book, like you can't find a replacement and all these things, and the market's not good enough at the moment to find someone who can come in, and all these kind of excuses. So players really shouldn't be making gentlemen's agreements. I think Isak's a funny one as well. I think he made a mistake in signing a 6-year contract when he went there. I think that was particularly as he clearly saw it as a stepping stone. You're not telling me that Newcastle would have said, we're not signing you unless you sign a 6-year contract. They would have gone to 5. So I think that was a poor decision. And it is one of the reasons I remember when these links first kind of surfaced, I was quite skeptical about them, because I just couldn't see how, with that contractual situation, he would get out of there, really. And particularly because Newcastle's hand had been strengthened by winning a trophy, Champions League qualification. It looked a really difficult deal to do. What I kind of underestimated, I think, was the extent to which he would push his way out the door, make it completely untenable that he could play for the club again. Not something I kind of expected to really happen, really. So I kind of judged that wrong. But as you say, I think it's a lesson to players about contract length. Harry Kane made a similar mistake at Tottenham, actually signing a 6-year deal, I believe. It's a lesson about that. It's a lesson about not accepting promises behind closed doors about you being able to depart. You have to get that stuff written down and release clauses inserted. That's an absolute must. So maybe players will learn from that one, and maybe someone like a Marc Guehi will have learned a completely different lesson as well. So it's I think agents should be taking note from what's happened this summer.
Yeah, I do wonder if it does just sort of change the landscape, because, as you said, Marc Guehi behaves perfectly, says all the right things. Even plays for Palace, doesn't he, in that Sunday evening game as well? Does everything that you should do. And then you think of, obviously, the players that we've just talked about there. But even Nicholas Jackson, is that the example of Gaze is called off last minute? Jackson's is kind of called off, but he goes, I'm not moving. I'm staying on the tarmac in Munich. I'm not going home. And it kind of like forces it. It's like, it just sets that precedent, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is it. The players, when they aren't wanted by the clubs, are treated appallingly. Like Nicholas Jackson, an absolutely perfect example of that. You look at the bomb squad at Manchester United, the ones that they wanted to kick out the door. How Marcus Rashford, who, has been, outside of probably Bruno Fernandes, the best Manchester United player of the last 10 years, at the point at which they decided his wages were untenable, they've treated him horrendously. So, it's a business when fans want it to be and clubs want it to be, and then it's an emotional pursuit where we should all love the team we represent and support, or whatever, when it suits them. So it's just a nonsense, isn't it? I'm pretty sure Newcastle will have been kicking players out the door this summer who they didn't want. I'm pretty sure they won't have felt that Johan Wissa's behaviour was disgraceful, and yet you've got and then the converse to that, you've got Marc Guehi doing all the right things, as you say, acting so classily, and his reward for that is to be denied his dream move to Liverpool. It's just ridiculous, and so much hypocrisy knocking about. And I think the best thing we can do is to not get dragged into it and kind of supporting the clubs we support or write about or whatever. in their actions around this. It's just recognizing it all for what it is as a whole, really, which is, just an absolutely ruthless, dirty business at times. And I felt for Marc Guehi with the way that one played out, because what more could he have done? And what I think is the most frustrating aspect of this. I also sympathise, by the way, with Oliver Glasner's stance. Like, why should he have his squad weakened? He's absolutely right. That's not fair to do to him. But what will be amusing is when Amorim gets sacked in 3 months' time and Oliver Glasner has put his foot down about this, he will go to Manchester United. You just watch this happen. They will want another 3 at the back manager. He's the best in the business at the moment. And he will go to Manchester United, leaving Marc Guehi behind him. And again, it will be another lesson for everyone of how short-term and ruthless and selfish this entire business is.
And I've got to ask you this. It's a bit aside from it, but did you see that bit in the Sammy Mockball article for the BBC on this, where Steve Parish wasn't available until 6 p.m. because he was doing a Soho spin class in Soho? Did you clock that one as well?
Yeah, and again, kind of teaches you about the amateurishness still that is all the way through sport. Any sport I've ever covered, really, you find this, because as much as it's a business and a multi-million-pound business, it's a game at the end of the day, and still there's elements of how serious it's treated, that kind of leak through there, and you hear stories like that. And on transfer deadline day, for him to be doing that and thinking, just move your spin class till the next day. I'm sure that's absolutely possible. When there's deals and people's futures are at stake, and the future of your manager who's brought you club's first ever major trophy, and all these things are up in the air. And it just kind of tells a story, doesn't it, really, of how serious they all take it. And it's why you see clubs consistently making bad decisions, is because of leadership like that. And that maybe a little bit unfair on Palace, who've been incredibly well run in recent times. But that was if that reporting is accurate, it's a pretty poor moment, really, wasn't it?
Doesn't really reflect well. And this is when we're talking about players having to force it now. Have we missed something? Like, I know fax machines have gone. Have transfer requests gone? Because we've seen an Isak statement. Then we've seen a Visser statement, like social media. A transfer request a thing of the past a little bit now.
Yeah, it kind of seems it, because people don't want to give up the loyalty, although I believe Isak did give up a fairly significant chunk there that Newcastle ended up saving on to get it through, though it wouldn't have been all of his loyalty bonus, that's for sure, because that would have been a really significant amount of money. But it seems like players aren't seeing that as an option now, because they refuse to give up that money. So, maybe that would grease the wheels of some of these transfers a little bit easier, but nobody seems to want to go there. So, I think that maybe they're a thing of the past.
Does seem to have drifted on that way. And then trying to, as you say, because it can be sort of tribal balance and, just looking at it from one lens. I mean, Ibu Konate's within his last year. If we're saying it both ways and, that players have to force it, we're probably not into, right of mind, and obviously want this to happen, to complain too much if he does run the contract down, are we?
No, exactly. And I think this is driving this contract situation. Some of the way over the top criticism we've seen, like, why I don't understand. Maybe it's just kind of seeing this as a job, and I absolutely love football. Don't get me wrong. So it's not like I'm kind of emotionally detached, but seeing it through the lens of a job and being close to the people who are in it. I just don't think people need to be this emotional about situations like this. Like, Konate wants the best possible contract for himself coming into his peak years. Liverpool want to pay as little as they can for as good a performances as they can get from him. It's a negotiation. He may reach an agreement on that. They may not. He may have other deals on the table that look really attractive to go and live elsewhere, to go and win another league, to go and perhaps earn more money elsewhere. That is absolutely fine. And he's not antagonizing fans in any way. He's not... he's not letting anybody down. He's not a local lad either. So I just don't understand. This may or may not resolve itself, but Liverpool are pretty fine with it resolving itself in a way where if he doesn't sign a new contract this season, then he goes on a free. So what? We're absolutely fine with that. We're willing to take that risk to keep some stability this season. The player, I know he had a couple of poor performances start the season, as I say, but I've not had a sniff about his professionalism or his mind being elsewhere, anything like that. and it might not work out the way that everybody wants it to, but it's fine. It's football. Everybody's got to make the best decision for themselves. And like I say, I don't think he's antagonizing fans. I don't think he's doing this like Trent Alexander-Arnold was, or, like I say, he's not the local lad. So it's just a fine situation that I don't think anybody has to get too kind of het up about and maybe kind of lose their mind. If he does go at the end of this season on a free transfer, I still think he should go with everybody's blessing, because he's been a phenomenal player for Liverpool, and the contract, he just couldn't get there. And I don't think his demands are outrageous. It's just slightly above maybe where Liverpool want to go at the moment. And by the way, it could still be resolved. There's plenty of time left. We saw that with Van Dijk. We saw it with Salah. So yeah, I just think, tensions need to be to kind of simmer down a little bit around this situation, and particularly in light of everything else we've seen in the transfer market.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that resolves itself one way or the other. But I suppose then the big decision, if you were a player or if you're an agent, it's got to be written down now. Gentlemen's agreements are things of the past. And if you want the move, you may just have to force it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think, hopefully we don't have to see more of the forcing, because no matter what you say, and even though it works in Liverpool's benefit in this situation, it is unsavoury, isn't it? We don't really necessarily, it's a good story to cover and it's fun in that sense, but it's, you don't need to see clubs at war and players at war with the clubs and kind of breaking that bond that they've had with fans, because now Newcastle fans absolutely hate Isak, and it's kind of like, well, he should have been a big part of their history and absolutely loved by supporters. So that's a real shame. But it's all on the agent not getting that kind of clause or anything, and not getting anything written down. I think it's also partly on Newcastle being so poorly run, by the way. They do not escape blame for this. The kind of, the gap at the top that's been there has allowed this to fester, and the disconnect between kind of Eddie Howe and the ownership over how they would approach this situation. That's not been helpful at all. But yeah, you don't really want to see this kind of going on. So people need to get this stuff written down and need to have agreements in place, and maybe clubs need to be better run as well. In the case of maybe Crystal Palace and Newcastle this summer. But it's not something you enjoy seeing as someone who loves football.
Indeed, yeah. Transfer requests, media statements, and spin classes in Soho. I didn't think we'd be talking about, but there we go. And I mean, the final topic has been driven a little bit by what's happened this morning. I mean, you've probably seen this in the tweet from Mo Salah about, it's been mentioned that certain forwards have departed, certain forwards have come in. And an apt tweet there from Mo Salah saying, how about we celebrate the great signings without disrespecting the Premier League champions? There's always going to be change. There always was going to be change in the forward line, of course. But people are walking away with title medals, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, again, what a better example could you think of, by the way, to sum up what we've just been talking about there, in terms of, we love these players and they should stay when they're performing well. And as soon as there's kind of a sense that they're not performing at the top level, get rid of them. They're useless and we've upgraded on them. I hate you. You're awful. It's kind of, what are we doing here? Like, if you actually love the game and you love the club and you love the players who come through and give their absolute best, which these two players here, I mean, unbelievable. I've seen them coming off the pitch with kind of drenched in sweat, giving absolutely everything. Darwin Núñez, it wasn't working out for him a lot of the time at Liverpool, but he was always there, always trying his best. You could not doubt the fact that he kept putting himself in positions, and his work rate and closing down was there. And Luis Diaz, consistently work rate, unbelievable, and quality moments from both, by the way. A lot of unbelievable quality, but just to talk about the kind of basics that they give you as a supporter base, Luis Diaz in that Carabao Cup final, that for me was right up there with, you remember Craig Bellamy in the Carabao Cup semi against the Carling Cup semi against City, worked his socks off and was kind of dragging the team over the line. I remember Luis Diaz in that game, and he was like that all the time. So, I don't understand this desperation from huge platforms like that to kind of immediately do these down. It just shows no wonder these players want to get off, and they don't. No wonder Canate, if Canate sees that, why would he sign a new contract? Because it's like, you don't care. And if you sign someone else who you might think is better than him after a couple of weeks, then you'll be saying, oh, well, we've upgraded. So, there's no love there, and it just makes me sad reading stuff like that. And fair play to Mo Salah for calling that out, really. And the only downside is that will get them interactions and money on X, won't it? So probably job done as far as they're concerned. But I just think stuff like that is so poor, and it really does feed into what we were talking about clubs and even supporters are just happy to discard you as soon as you're considered no longer useful, or they can get someone in who they think is an upgrade. There is, there's no real love there, and a lot of fans aren't like that. But it makes me sad to see stuff like that, to be honest.
It does, because there's a couple of players there walking away with a fair few collections in the medal trophy, aren't they, in the cabinet, as it were. So yeah, the forward line, I suppose, because they were both members of it, and it's been a big overhaul. And in terms of senior forwards, because I probably was naughty because I called it 5.5 in the agenda to you, because Rio Ngamoa is quite young, so I don't know if you can count him as a full adult yet, so to speak. But Isak, Salah, Gakpo, Ekitike, Chiesa, and young Rio. When you look at that forward line, because it's sometimes unfair just to go back to last season, is there anywhere you're thinking it's got major strengths, and anywhere you're thinking it could just be a little bit short at all?
Well, I don't think they're going to be short in that centre forward role. That looks pretty tasty, doesn't it? Those two being able to play there, Chiesa as well behind them. I think Liverpool are certainly all right in that position, but it's it's a bit of a strange one, because obviously that left-hand side, the depth maybe doesn't look as good as it was on paper last season. If Diaz started a game, you would have Gakpo to come off the bench and vice versa. So you'd always have a really senior quality player coming in there. And obviously Gakpo's probably going to start the majority down that side. And so, the sub then is going to be 16-year-old Ngamoa. But, we talked about it enough. You can't block him. And he's already got a Premier League goal to his name, a winner at St. James's Park. So, maybe he's just ready to do this. And maybe you're not going to see Diaz level quality off the bench as you maybe saw last season. He's going to have some poor games. He's going to take time to adapt. But it's really interesting that, I just think you can't block him off. You've got to let him do that. And there's enough firepower in other parts of the pitch for, okay, maybe you're slightly weaker in left wing, but you're a lot stronger, say, in attacking midfield, where Florian Wirtz is probably going to provide more goals and assists than a Szoboszlai would, as brilliant as Szoboszlai is. On the right-hand side, you've still got Mo Salah, who, again, been criticised to start this season, but he's got a goal and an assist to his name already in three wins. So, and then in that centre forward role, Isak and Ekitike, between them, they're going to get an awful lot of goals. So, and then in amongst that as well, by the way, the bonus of keeping a fully fit Chiesa now, who it seems determined to prove a point, and already got a key goal. He was involved in the goal at Newcastle as well at the end. And he can cover all of the positions. So I think they look really strong there, to be honest. That, for me, almost the keeping Chiesa has been the key thing that's tipped me over into feeling kind of that they're still okay there. If they'd have lost him, I'd have felt a little bit nervous about if injuries bite and a League Cup game comes around. Yeah. Excuse me. But the fact he can play all three positions and he's absolutely determined to stick around, and the manager seems to fancy him a little bit more now than he did. Liverpool just look really, really well covered to me now. So very excited to see it all in practice and see how they all link up with Wirtz behind them. And but yeah, it's a different composition that they've got this time around, but it looks a really good one, I think.
There are some special names in that list. And I mean, in terms of names, some things can be hard to call. Some things I don't think will be too much. I mean, surely when they're fit, of course, in a big game, Isak and Salah are going to be on the team sheet. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. If it is a huge game, though, people talked about Ekitike going left. People reference Gakpo just signing a new contract. Does it not feel like it'll be Isak, Salah and another, which may be quite hard to judge?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be that. I think the two that you just pretty much undroppable if it's the biggest games, isn't it? You really can't leave them out. That left-hand side is going to be interesting. I mean, I have seen a lot of that talk about Ekitike on the left-hand side. I personally kind of struggle to see it just because, it's just a tough one to see, because I just think he's never played left-hand side in his life, really. You look on Transfermarkt and you can see kind of where the dots pop up, and even if they occasionally play down the wing, you will see that he's never really done it. So why is the manager going to suddenly start doing that, especially when he's got Gakpo, especially when he wants to use Engamoa, especially when Wirtz is possibly slightly more natural down that side anyway. I'm just kind of struggling to see that. So then, but then it's up for grabs then, and I think maybe Cody Gakpo definitely looks the strongest bet, doesn't he, for the starting left hand side role in the early parts of the season? But really interesting with seasons, there's an ebb and a flow there, and shirts change hands, don't they? And you saw it last season. At one point, it was Gakpo started on the bench, didn't he, last season? And it was definitely Diaz, and then he started scoring all those goals in the cups, and then he came back in, and it was Gakpo who was starting a bit more, and vice versa, and then Diaz gets moved up front. And so, all these kind of things go on in a season. So it'd be really interesting to see how that all plays out. But I think it's really difficult to predict, outside of saying that I would be amazed if Liverpool get to a Champions League final in May and it isn't Salah, Isak, and one more, whoever that is. But I think that's one thing we can maybe be confident about.
2 questions left, and the second one will be the hardest, because we say as big decisions, we always ramp up and they get harder as they go along. The players in this mix, is there any sort of concern that, you mentioned Chiesa, and I think it's great he stayed. He never comes on in a proper competitive game before 75 minutes for Arne Slot. Rio and Gamoa, a few minutes. Is there any concern if they have to be relied on repeatedly for you at all?
I'm not too concerned about it on the basis that Arne Slot doesn't seem to be worried about it. There was never any chance of had Rodrigo shot down immediately when that link emerged. Never been given encouragement on Morgan Rogers, certainly in this window at least. Maybe he could be a long-term target, but definitely not in this window. And yeah, I think there was another left winger that Fofana was getting knocked about quite a bit, wasn't he? And I never got given any encouragement on that. So I think that, there's a willingness to use them more. I think with Chiesa, it's just been a very specific situation at the start of the season. But, I think he's more in a position now to maybe get starts in the cups and then see where you can go from there. With Rio, the fact he threw him on against Newcastle in that horrendous situation Liverpool were in, I think you will be seeing him before 75 minutes, and I think you'll see him get plenty of starts himself as well. So, if those two can lighten the load in the cups and then, make big contributions in the Champions League and the Premier League, maybe mostly off the bench, but, there's enough Champions League games there at the end where Chiesa can get starts, Rio can get starts, and it just eases the load on everybody else, and that would be absolutely fantastic. So, I think he'll trust them enough to use them a bit more than certainly to use Chiesa more than we saw last season. And I don't doubt there's trust in Rio with the way he used him against Newcastle. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how both get on this season.
It is going to be intriguing. And we come to our final question, which is one with options around this forward line, and the toughest one I'm going to ask you today. You can have one of 3 options. You can have these 6 forwards, 25-26 as option 1. As option 2, you can have the forwards from last season 6. And option 3, you can have anywhere 18 to 20 with the original front 3 of Salah, Mane and Firmino. I'll let you pick a Shaqiri or Minamino backing it up. Which option would you go for?
Is Divock in there as well, to be fair?
He was
Yeah, I'll have to go for the classic front 3 with Origi backing them up, just because. How good was that? It was absolutely unbelievable. Probably the best version we've ever seen of Salah was probably last season in terms of pure individual brilliance. But I think I still feel like that was kind of peak Salah, what we saw in those earlier seasons alongside Mane and Firmino. And I've never seen a front 3 that gels as well as that did in terms of complementary skills. You could kind of go long to any of them. You could, they had the pacing behind of basically 2 strikers on the wings, and then the intelligence and brilliance of Firmino, who is one of the players I've most enjoyed watching while covering Liverpool. You know, if this mix of whatever Liverpool, and I think the difference is as well, actually, is that, you know, we're saying there's kind of a bit of a debate on that left-hand side. It's Salah, Isak, and then one other, and we don't know. The brilliance of that front three, and then to have Origi to come off the bench, who always seemed to score in clutch moments, was that all three were like in the peak at the same time. All three worked together beautifully. It's one of the greatest kind of attacking units I think we've ever seen in football, genuinely. So I've still got a lot of affection for them. So they may be the ones that I pick. But, I mean, I'm very excited to see how this group of attackers gets on this season. It's you know, what a collection of footballers Liverpool have got for themselves there. So it's only because we haven't seen them yet. I would go for the kind of 18-19 time, that front three. But, wow, I mean, this could be right up there, I think, in terms, because the quality is absolutely there.
It is a special collection, yeah. Everyone's waiting for that Burnley first game back, isn't it, to see who lines up and what is made of it. Exciting times indeed. So there we go, ladies and gents. It is a window for the ages. Well, certainly the most exciting one we've seen in recent times. It may be unsavoury, but don't bother with a gentleman's agreement. Players may just have to force it from now on. And in terms of this front six, they are special. Maybe not quite the prime 18 to 20 with Divock backing it up, but a special collection we're waiting to see. All it leaves me to say is ever, for the time, the insight, and for answering all the questions in depth, David, it is much appreciated.
Well, thank you.
And ladies and gents, that was another Big Decisions by Anfield Index.